great to see your faces. It's Wednesday already. How'd that happen?
Yes.
Oh, wait, never mind. Nope. Back it up. It's Friday when this comes out, and and they think it's live. Okay. Hey, ladies, good to see your faces.
Yay. Good to see you. It's Friday.
It is Friday. Well, I'm excited for this guest. So, Shannon, why don't you kick us off?
Sounds good. Today, we're getting together with Josh Klapper, winemaker and owner of Timbre Winery. Josh's love for wine led him first into a career as sommelier, which led to a Wine Spectator Grand Award for the wine list at Sona Restaurant in Los Angeles in 2004.
After working closely with some of the Central Coast trailblazing winemakers, including Jim Clendenin and Bob Lundquist, Josh founded La Fenetra Wines in Santa Barbara County, which in 2016 became Tambor Winery.
Crafting modern wines in a variety of styles, Josh is constantly honing his winemaking technique to produce wines that better express terroir year after year. Klapper lives in Arroyo Grande, California with his wife, Chiasa, and 2 children, Lily and Alex. Let's welcome Josh.
Yay!
Hey.
Hi.
Hey there, how are you?
Oh, sorry. This is like a new desk setup for me. So is that too bright behind me?
No,
you're fine. Yeah. How you doing?
Well, I certainly don't work for Keller Williams.
Oh my gosh.
I'm good. I'm good.
I see you're originally from Manhattan.
Yes.
It's a 2-part question. What brought you to the Central Coast, and what inspired you to go from sommelier to a winemaker?
Okay. So just so you know, I am terrible at even 1-part questions. So I will try to stay focused all the way through.
Okay.
So what brought me to the Central Coast was while I was living in New York, I met my my girlfriend who became my wife. Currently my wife still, fortunately. I met her in New York. Yeah. And she was from California, and in the early 2000s, I think we're both we were living in New York and looking for a change, and she wanted to go back to California, and so I was willing, and so we moved to LA, where her family was living at the time, and in 2005 I made the transition from sommelier to winemaker. At the time, there was actually a number of somms who were making that leap. Probably the most famous at the time was a guy by the name of Mike Bonacorsi. He has since passed away, but very influential sommelier. And he inspired me to kind of think about making wine. I started doing it for fun. And I started in 2005, and by 2010, I was totally hooked. I'd already, I'd really grown the winery to some like a reasonable size. And I realized I couldn't do it from LA anymore. And that's what actually brought me up to the Central Coast. So I've been commuting for years between LA and Santa Maria. And then I realized that as I would go north, I would get more and more excited, and then I'd go back south and I would get more and more depressed as like the lights became more and the concrete. Sorry, my dog is hunting flies in the house right now. So
that's a good dog to have.
She's like, running around. If you see a fly and then a chihuahua go flying,
Awesome.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay. So I see you were mentored by some of the most well-known winemakers in the area, including Jim Clendenin, Bob Lundquist, and Jim Edelman. Edelman is right? The pronunciation?
Yeah.
What are 1 or 2 of the most important things you learned from each, or what did you get from those collaborations?
I mean, from all 3 of them, I learned a lot. So probably the biggest lesson from Jim Clendenin was, and he's the founder of Au Bon Climat Winery, kind of like one of the kings of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, beginning of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay on the Central Coast, really brought it to the world. I think Richard Sanford was probably one of the first, but Jim really got out there. And from Jim, I just saw this insane work ethic. I mean, the guy travels 100 days a year, 150 days a year, selling wine all over the country, and he's in his 60s now. I think almost 70 actually, and still just constantly traveling, and you could see how much how hard he had to work to push his brand. From Bob, I kind of learned the ability to trust in the process. So, one of the Bobisms that I kind of use on a regular basis is that, if you're like, I kind of think about it when I'm putting together a blend. And I remember the first blend I put together was with Bob, and I said, Bob, how do you know how it's going to turn out? He said, I have no idea, but if all the wines are good, then the blend will be good too. It's like, just trust that it'll be okay. So, that's all about, quality in, quality out, right? If you have to start with good stuff, you'll have good stuff. And then from Jim Edelman, I learned that if my wife wants a glass of wine, I should be really excited and just give her a glass of wine. Like, don't find it. That was Edelman's given me a lot of family advice over the years, but he was their GM, and he's been their GM for over 30 years. So he's not.
Wow.
He had a little local brand called Makor, and he's always at the farmers market in AG. That's where I tend to see him. But 3 amazing winemakers. Yeah.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, so timbre is not a word that you see very often, and we know that there's a musical theme to your wine name. So can you just tell us about your winery theme and how you came up with the name? And
Sure. So full disclosure, part of the reason why I'm late is I got a new electric guitar. I was playing with it, and then my alarm went off, and I was like, oh, I gotta go turn my computer, and that's when you called. I was behind the 8 ball. But so timbre is timbre or timbre, it's pronounced both ways, is a musical term, and it refers to the sound of one's voice when singing. So it's actually like the fingerprint of your voice. So it's why each of the 3 of you would sound different, even if there was no video. You would know each other's voices. That's literally the timbre or timbre of your voice. And as a winemaker, I don't own any vineyards. So I source fruit from, depending on the vintage, between 5 and, last year I probably sourced from almost 15 different vineyards. But ultimately the wines that I make from those vineyards are unique. They really taste like my wines. So that's kind of like the timbre of my winemaking, the voice of my winemaking, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's the idea of the winemaker's expression showing up in the wines themselves, So.
Yeah. And then the spin-offs of those are like, you have a wine that's called the Black Keys, right? And then Dancing Queen. So they're all like musically.
My dog is going crazy. I feel like she's gonna unplug something. Oh, she got it. This is my chihuahua.
Oh, there you go.
Oh my God.
Eating a fly right now as we speak. Sorry, God, it's not weird.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have one called the Black Keys. There is a Dancing Queen though. We do have that one. That's a rosé that was made by actually my head of business development, Bethany. She just does all the sales for me because I'm not organized enough to do that. And then Gary Gates, he's a very old friend and invested in some wine projects of mine, and he comes and works harvest every year. And Dancing Queen was a fun one because with that wine we donated a percentage of the sales to Pride essentially. And unfortunately there was no Pride this year, but we did donate a portion to LGBTQ plus an organization that kind of works with at-risk youth in that community, and it was it's a pretty cool way to give back. But yeah, all the wines have a musical name, so yeah.
Well, that kind of goes right to Shannon's question, so I'll let Shannon do the next question.
Right. I of course asked my husband, "Do you have any Dancing Queen? I want to try it." So he said, "Unfortunately, he didn't have any." So I can't wait to try that one. But I love the program that you started during COVID and shelter in place of giving back to our area restaurants that were closed or had limited service. Thank you for your support in some of our favorite places.
Yeah.
And how did you come up with that program?
When the whole thing went down and we had the shelter in place and businesses were closing, I was pretty scared about our business, about our winery. We sell mostly through restaurants, but pretty quickly I realized that as a winery, any sales that we missed out on, we still had wine. Those were going to come back eventually, and I didn't think I was going to go out of business. I started my winery during the financial crisis in 2008, and so that's like pretty much the economy tanked as soon as I started selling my first wines. And so I felt like I had the ability to kind of work through those issues and figure out other ways to sell wine and make things happen. But what I did know that, you know, since I came from restaurants and since I sell mostly to restaurants, huge number of my friends actually make their livings from working or owning or, you know, just being part of restaurants. And the revenue that they didn't make during this time was never going to come back, you know? And so I just wanted to do something where if people came to my place, they'd also be supporting those restaurants that were trying to be open, that were trying to deliver food. So essentially we donated 10% of all of our sales in the tasting room to a restaurant that was doing something to go. So like, you know, like Spoon Trade, Sidewalk Cafe. I don't know. We did a bunch of them. There's 7 or 8 Pappy's in Pismo, or Happy's,
Yeah.
and
Happy.
Pappy's and Pismo both actually.
Yeah.
But I just, you know, I felt for those people that they were really, you know, for better or for worse, they were screwed. You know, it was a very difficult time, and it still is. I mean, most of my friends that have independent restaurants in major cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco still haven't opened, and ultimately they're not sure if they can, because at reduced capacity, restaurants a tough margin business in the best of times, and so with 50% occupancy, it's really hard to pay your rent. So it's tough.
It's rough.
Very cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so along with that, we got to keep in touch with all of you all because you started something called the Tambor Show. So how did that idea come about? I loved having my Friday start with your face really close to my screen and what hat you might be wearing that day and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's pretty funny. I think, you know, the idea behind the Tambor Show was, you know, most of our local wine club members and clientele and guests and friends, and, you know, the reason they come to Tambor is, you know, when we open the tasting room, for me, the most important part of a restaurant was the service. And it didn't have to be fancy and it didn't have to be technically great, but it had to be warm. And if you have warm and friendly service, and if you're funny and happy, then people are going to want to come. The food could be absolutely terrible, but they'll still come back because they just like being there. They'll find something they like. Maybe they'll just have a beer or something, but that's the place that you want to go. If you go to a place that could have the best food in the world, and there's restaurants like that, you know, even in our area, but it's very cold, and so it's not that much fun, you know, at least for me. And so the idea with the Tambor Show was to try to keep that feeling of fun and warmth and friendship with all of our people while we couldn't actually see them. Because I think that was the biggest loss from this whole thing. The biggest loss, obviously, everyone's financially hurting, but I think everyone's hurting for human connection. And so I just vowed that even though this was a video that maybe people's kids were going to see, I don't know, that we were not going to dumb it down. It was going to be the full Tambor experience, and it was every week. So, and we were all a little bit sad when it ended, but it was also pretty stressful. Like, you know, we were like, what are we going to talk about today? I don't know. It's hard to produce a show, and we had absolutely like the smallest amount of production value of anything. It was still really difficult to do, you know? So, and people would give us those suggestions like, oh, you have to get this mic or you have to get this camera. And I was like, no, dude, like this is the camera right here. And
well,
so the dog's part of our show, what's her name?
Sorry?
Since the dog's part of our show, what's her name?
Who's what? Cookie?
The dog.
Oh, yeah,
the
Cookie.
dog. Cookie.
Yeah, she's looking at me now. She's like, oh, I don't want to be on camera. So, yeah,
I'm not ready for that.
No.
Wonderful.
So can you tell us too about your tasting room? Is it open? Are you serving food? Or if it's not open yet, what are you expecting to happen?
So we are open. We opened pretty quickly. The first weekend we couldn't do it. There was a lot of paperwork and things that you had to file with the ABC, which is like the alcohol beverage control in the area. I think that's what it's called. and there was a lot of hoops that we had to jump through. We did open that second weekend, which was we had to serve food, so we contracted with a local vendor that we really get along with, and we did food for literally 2 days, and then they said that the next week we didn't have to have food, so that was great. That was a lot of work for almost absolutely nothing. But I do have like a fridge full of charcuterie, which I'm eating, and I'm excited about,
It's always my favorite.
Yeah, right. And so now we're pretty much open on weekends. We encourage reservations during the week. You can kind of come, and we're not technically open during the week. It's mostly pickups, but if you want to buy a bottle and sit, we have a back patio area that we've set up where people can sit and enjoy a glass of wine or a bottle of wine. We also do flights, but it's different than we used to do it. So the flight used to be poured by somebody. They'd come and pour each wine and tell you about each one.
Right.
In an effort to kind of minimize contact. All 5 wines are put out in front of you in little carafes, and you can, you have a little menu which tells you all about each wine. So we've kind of adapted a little bit, but yeah, now we're actually offering tastings again, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing for us though is we used to do some pretty wicked parties for our pickup parties. I'm not going to say there wasn't lots of inebriation. It was a lot of fun. And I'm just really sad we can't do those because I love parties, and that's
Looking forward to those too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I also don't want a Tambor super spreading event. That would not be a good thing.
Yeah.
No. I think you're talking to 3 people that are very much people. That's what we do. So It's been a little bit frustrating with the lack of interaction. I think Shannon's literally exploding with an overload of hugging.
Yeah. I think that was
hug somebody soon.
Yeah, the first post that we sent out, we basically said, hey, we're sorry for anyone that's being hurt by this. Unfortunately, we're closed for tastings, I think, and like service, and then hugs was the third one. Like we can't do hugs,
Yeah.
But I have hugged a few people besides my children and wife. It felt dangerous every single time, but it was worth it. So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a whole new world. Well, those are all the questions we have, and we really enjoyed getting to know your background a little bit better. So I'm so appreciative that you took the time away from that new guitar. What kind of guitar was it? Is it?
It's a used guitar. I don't even know the brand, but it looked pretty cool. It's like bright yellow, and it's definitely my style. And then I got a little 3/4 guitar from my son and daughter because they're little, and so I'm hoping they'll kind of pick it up. They already play piano like unbelievably. They're both really good. And
wow!
So it's time to introduce a second instrument so we can have a band someday. My hope is that when we can reopen, maybe we'll start doing music at the tasting room. So
I love that.
Do that.
Cool.
That'd be awesome.
Can't wait for it.
Yeah, if I commit in a public space, maybe I'll actually do it because I'm very shy actually about playing music.
Playing your music. Okay, well then we're all gonna come to the first time you do it. So
that's awesome. You can all laugh at me,
Oh.
I don't think so. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
With Wine in Hand, Ashlea Boyer,
Jordan Hamm,
and Shannon Bowdey
with the Pismo Beach Home Team.